In this lecture, we'll talk about doing vulnerability analysis, or what you can even call as vulnerability assessment. This is the next step after completing your passive information gathering and active information gathering steps. And right here, what we do is that we find and deal with the vulnerabilities. So basically, the data which you have gathered during the earlier phases of your pen test, you're going to use them to find, that means identify, analyze, which means researching or understanding the vulnerabilities, and ranking, which means rating the vulnerabilities. That is what we are going to learn all about in today's lecture. And first of all, you should know that vulnerability assessment, it's non-intrusive in nature. That means you don't do an exploitation here. The reason I'm telling you this right here is because in a lot of cases, your clients may ask you to not do a penetration test, but rather a whole separate vulnerability assessment. So see, vulnerability assessment, it can be done as a part of your pen test as well, but sometimes it can be done as a separate job as well, and companies really like to do that. So if you're doing a just vulnerability assessment job, in that case, don't do exploitation. You're just gonna find the vulnerabilities and do all of the mostly passive stuff, but you're not going to validate those vulnerabilities with exploits. That's the step you do in penetration testing. So that's the major difference between a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. It's mostly done using automated tools like Nessus, Nexpose, Vega, Arachne, Aculinux, a lot of them, but it could be done manually as well. I will show you both of the methods, manual as well as automated, so that this lecture is really valuable for you. Now let's directly jump in to techniques to assess, and right here, as with everything else, there is a manual way and an automated way. So first of all, let me tell you the manual way, how you assess it. First of all, you review the extracted data. That means the data which you have gathered during the earlier phases of your test. You're just gonna check that data once again and then search the internet in order to research them. Okay? And then finally, you can even visit the vulnerability sites. Some good options can be Security Focus and Zero Day Initiative. Apart from that, then you will do your scoring stuff. I will talk about that in a minute, but let me tell you how it is done. So doing it manually is that simple that you may laugh. Basically, the data which you have, so in this case I'm saying I did an Nmap scan and I just got to see that okay, these are the 3 ports and here are the services along with their versions. Now for this example, let me take the first one itself and show you how vulnerability assessment can be done on this in a manual way. Now one thing you should remember is that vulnerabilities can be found anywhere. It's not limited that it will only be on some service. It can be on the operating system. It can be on the web application. It can be on plugins. It can be on the CMS and even some physical vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities can be in a lot of places, but for this example, let me just take this first service right here, ProFTPD 1.3.3c, and explain you vulnerability assessment on it. So essentially what you need to do right here is just go on internet and use your favorite search engine. In this case, I'll use Google, and then just paste your target here, what you want to research about, and after the service, I'll say vulnerabilities. That's it. You press enter, and right here you get to see all of the vulnerabilities which seem to be here. So you can see there are so many articles, so many websites, so many PDFs and so many databases which talk about vulnerabilities related to this. Now this phase, this researching phase in the manual assessment can help you finish 2 phases of your vulnerability assessment, which is identifying and analyzing. So you just see that there are vulnerabilities. That means you completed your identification, and for the analysis part, you have data here to read. Now you can read this kind of data and understand how exactly this vulnerability works and how critical it is. And also you can analyze if it is safe to exploit it or validate it, because some vulnerabilities, they are very dangerous, and if you're trying to exploit them, they can just cause severe damage to the system. Instead of validating the vulnerabilities, you can just destroy a whole system in some cases. So it's important to understand that how exactly a vulnerability or an exploit for that vulnerability works during the vulnerability assessment phase itself. Now right here, you can just go ahead and visit the site to see what are the vulnerabilities. You have some other site, Rapid7, the company who made the popular tool Metasploit, and a page regarding that. It says it exploits a malicious backdoor that was added to the ProFTPD download archive. And then you have cvdetails.com. This is one of my favorite places to see a whole list of the security vulnerabilities of the product I'm researching about. We will see that, and you can see we have Tenable here, the company who made the popular tool Nessus, and you can just visit this site right here to see the vulnerabilities. And I hope you're getting my point. You just go on Google and search about everything that you're looking for. Just search for the product and the vulnerabilities, and then in the CV details site, you will be able to see a lot of results. So the entries, you can see some of them has very low score like 1.2. These are pretty much the safe or almost impossible to be exploited things. So right here, what you can see is we have a few 7 vulnerabilities, and mainly what you're interested in are the 8, 9, 10 score ones, because they are mainly the most critical. So you can just visit any one of them, and I'll open the both of them. As you can see, I have an exec code and an exec code overflow with both of the 10 scores, and actually one is 9. So let me just visit that out. And you have some others as well, which you can see in case you don't find any high level critical vulnerability here. But since we have it, let's just see them. So first of all, you can read the description, what exactly is this vulnerability about, and right below that, you will get to see the CVSS scores and the vulnerability type. So CVSS, I'll talk about it in a minute, that how you can calculate it manually, but you can see the confidentiality impact. There is total information disclosure resulting in all system files being revealed. Integrity impact. There is a total compromise of system integrity. There is a complete loss of system protection resulting in the entire system being compromised. And availability as well, it's complete. There is a total shutdown of the affected resource possible. So you can get to know right here that there is a complete compromise of the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and the system who has got this vulnerability is really in a great risk. Apart from that, you have got excess complexity, which is really low. What this means is anyone can exploit this vulnerability with very little knowledge or skill. So it's kind of an easy target, and the vulnerability can be accessed pretty easily and taken advantage of. But, here is a condition. This vulnerability requires an attacker to be logged in to the system. Now, since we do not have such kind of access right here, as you can see, I'm not in the system and I'm just doing kind of an black box stuff. That's why I'm not exactly going, like, it's just not an opportunity for me to even try to do those things or use this vulnerability. And gained access, none, so you don't get any access in reality. So seems like it just does some side stuff, not exactly gets you some access. Vulnerability type is execute code, so you can just get some general information from here. Then the related oval definitions, you have some of them, and then the products affected by the CV. So which of the products and their versions are affected by this? You can check that our version also falls into this 3.3.3 C, somewhere it should be, so 1.3.3 C, you can see it falls here. That means it is completely vulnerable, but we cannot use it anyways because it requires some authentication, and we don't have that. And we have also got number of affected versions by product. So the vulnerable versions for this product, ProFTPD, are 62, and it's quite a huge number, and it's very dangerous. References which you can see and check basically to learn more about this vulnerability, and you can see largely some metasploit modules which are normally the exploit related to the CV. So this is how you can see a website and get information from here, and you can complete your identification and analysis phase for your test. There was some other vulnerability as well. Same thing, you have the description, you have the CVSS score. This time you don't even need any authentication, and this time the vulnerability type is exec code overflow. The products, we have our product as well, 1.3.3c. It should be somewhere 1.3.2c, so it's around that actually, 1.3.3b. So it's pretty much around that, as I said. Again, the number of affected versions by product, some references, and this time we have got some exploits as well in Metasploit. So you cannot execute the exploit, but you can definitely learn about them and how they work if you want to confirm how exactly this vulnerability can get exploited. So these are some things. You also have some other websites like Tenable. You can see this is talking about another vulnerability, and mostly it's just talking about some of the backdoor related vulnerabilities of this version, which is really a high risk thing. So we just get to know all of this information from here, and the solution is really simple: upgrade to ProFTPD version 1.3.3 or later. So basically upgrade to the stable and safe versions, that's the whole thing. And this is how you go on Google and search about this stuff. I know it was very simple and you might be thinking what was the even need to mention this, but really that's what we do. If there is any vulnerability, you will get to see it on your Google search results. That's the first thing which we have completed here. And next, you can even visit some specific vulnerability sites which can give you good information about some vulnerabilities. So in this case, I think it opens my Opera here. Let me just get that on Firefox. Security Focus, and the other one which we have, 0-Day Initiative, that's the other website which you can check. And Security Focus, you can see there are a lot of vulnerabilities. You can even search about the ones which you are looking for. But the main thing about this site is the format in which you get the information. It's very simple thing, and you get to see a good amount of info and relevant discussions, exploit solution references. This is like whatever you want to know about this vulnerability. And in reality, this is the websites I personally prefer if there is an entry about a specific vulnerability which I need to learn about. So it's one of my first options definitely. And then you have this other site called 0-Day Initiative. From this, you can learn about new vulnerabilities which probably have not been fixed, and maybe the security research discovered them, but later after the specific period when they were not exactly, I would say, able to fix. The vendor was not fixing the exact vulnerability. So after a period of time, it just got released here, and you can check that really well. So these are some websites you can look at, and that's how you do it. So that's the first thing. Now once you have identified and analyzed the data about a vulnerability, it would be the time to rank it. So it's really an important step which you will do before your reporting phase mainly, and it is also very simple here. So basically the best way is to use a scoring system like CVSS. So let me show that to you. CVSS is called the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, and this is basically the scoring system which I personally like to use, and it's a very famous one as well. There are many other systems which you can use as well. For example, the Dread. Companies even have their own, but this one is a very good as a general one. So there are many calculators actually, but the one which I like is from NVD, or you can say NIST. So let me just see and wait for the results. My internet is pretty slow today. Okay, I have the results, nvdnist.gov, that's the exact site we want to see. And from here, we should go into the vulnerability metrics. And then we can see the calculators here. So let's just go with the newest CVSS v3 calculator. And right here, you will get to see that this can calculate 3 types of scores for us: base score, temporal score, and environmental score, and then an overall score as well, combining all these 3. So we'll talk about them in a minute, what do they mean, but let's get started by base score metrics. Now this is generally the base score. This is done with the information which is generally provided by the vendor, and it's kind of a general thing. Here the information which you put, that's pretty much never going to change, and it is, as I said, provided by the vendor. So what that can mean here is that, for example, a vulnerability was identified in Microsoft Windows 10. Now Windows 10, this operating system, is made, or you can say managed, by a company called Microsoft. So this data for base score metrics can be provided by the company itself. Microsoft can provide it. So in this case, we don't have any special vulnerability, but still, let's just try to put anything in the attack vector and attack complexity and all these options to see what it gives to us. So in this case, what's the attack vector? So you can see that we have options such as network, adjacent network, local, and physical. So if some physical access is required, then this can be used. But in this case, since we are trying to do kind of an network level thing, network services level thing, let's just say network on that site. Then we have attack complexity. How hard is it to do the attack? How hard it is to exploit the system? Okay. So in this case, let's say it's very easy. We'll say low. It's low complexity. That means very easy. Then do you need to have any privileges on the system to exploit it? So for example, do you need to have a user there? Do you need to have some username or password something? So in this case, let's just say no, we don't require that. Then is some user interaction required? Sometimes you are doing some social engineering types of tests or client-side attacks when technical things don't seem to work and you really need to have some user interaction of your target. For example, there is a company which you are pen testing, and to run an exploit which you have identified, you need to have some employee interaction. So in this case, let's say no, we don't need it. And then we have scope. So scope means that can a software, like can this vulnerability can be leveraged to access systems or softwares which are beyond the scope exactly of like that system. So for an example, an exploit just exploits a single system and nothing more than that. In that case, it will be unchanged. But if it also helps you to affect resources which are beyond the scope of that single machine, maybe some other machines in the network or any resources for some other system, then you can put changed here. So in this case, let's say unchanged. Then you have impact metrics. Confidentiality, integrity, availability. What's the impact on them? Is it low? Is it high? Is it none? In this case, let's say high, high, high on each one of them. If you have forgot what these confidentiality, integrity, availability means, feel free to check my first lecture of this course where I have explained these things very nicely to you. So this is how we calculated the base score. Let's just check. Now you can see the base score is really high, 9.8, and the impact is 5.9. The exploitability is 3.9. So everything seems to be very high here. The impact is pretty big. If we just kind of change it to like changed here, you will get to see the base score changes. It becomes 10.0. And it really becomes a very bad vulnerability which can be exploited by anyone. So that's how you calculate the base score metrics. Then you have got temporal scope metrics as well, which depends on the level of knowledge you have about the vulnerability. So in this case, it says exploit code maturity. If you have some exploit for that vulnerability, then what kind of maturity it has? Like, is it a very easy thing? Is it functional? Is it like very high level of thing? is it proof of code. Proof of concept code, it's normally just about, it can show that a vulnerability exists, but really it's not very functional, but you can still use it or see it to a long extent in order to make your own function exploit code. And you can even select unproven that exploit exists. So you can choose that if you don't know if an exploit exists or not. And if you don't know anything about this, just say not defined. Okay? But in this case, let me just say functional exploit exists. Then the remediation level. What this means is that, for example, the vulnerability has got no official fix. What this means is that, for example, a vulnerability is there, then what is the remediation level? Like, at the moment, at the time, is there any fix available for that? So can an official fix be done? Like, in this case, this version of ProFTPD is vulnerable. But what was the solution we saw? It was to update it. Now, what does that mean? That means an official fix is available. So you can put that. But even if an official fix is not available, there are some things which can be done right here. For example, some temporary fix can be done, then you can put that. Or there can be some other workaround which can be done right here, or unavailable. So if there is really nothing which can be done about this vulnerability, then you can choose this. Then report confidence. So how much confident are you about that your target has got this vulnerability? You can say unknown, reasonable, confirmed. In this case, let me just say it's confirmed. Then we have environmental score, which is generally specific score for the exact your target organization. Now, how is it different from the basis score metrics is that this is done very generally. So by the data which is provided by the vendor, that is really very general for all of the systems. So maybe the basis score just says here that a vulnerability can be exploited very easily, the attack complexity is low, but in reality, in your environment, you have got some security controls in place like a firewall, which makes it pretty hard to, really attack the surface, attack the systems and exploit that vulnerability. So you can set those kind of things here, the specific data about the specific situation where you have in your test. You can set the attack vector here. In this case, let's just say network. Attack complexity, let's say something like low. Privileges required, let's say none. User interaction, none. Scope, so is this scope changed or unchanged? In this case, let's say unchanged. Confidentiality impact, let's say high. Integrity impact, high. Availability impact, that also high. And then you have got confidentiality requirement. What that means is that system really important? Like maybe the confidentiality breach is high, but in reality, do you care about that? So do you even need that level of confidentiality for that system? Those kind of things you can define here. In this case, let's say it's low, it's medium, and it's high. So I have set these values randomly, and when you will go above here again, you will get to see the basis score, the temporal score, environmental score, and the overall score. This is what you really care about, and you can just take this score from here and put that directly for this vulnerability from there. So that's the basic way how you use CVSS in order to calculate or rank a vulnerability or give it a good risk score. So that's the thing, and that's how we complete the manual part of this lecture. I hope it was very easy and you understood it very well. Now it's time to move on to automated assessment. So as the name suggests, it's automated. We'll be using some tools here in order to conduct the vulnerability assessment for us. There are a number of products available on the market. Let me just show you Nessus here, which is my personal favorite for doing network vulnerability assessment, and Vega vulnerability scanner for doing website vulnerability scanning. This way you can understand vulnerability assessment in both of the ways, and you will really be able to get an idea of what these can offer you.